Ever since the turn of the century, we've been seeing a quick decline in first-class products around the world. In the past, business class has been the cheaper way to get extra space, maybe a lie-flat seat, nicer food, and extra amenities as well. First class was much more secluded and private, had seats with even more legroom than business class, and the flight attendants are more like your personal concierge in the sky since there's so few people in first class. With new aircraft and products being released, airlines have stopped seeing the value in first class, as business class can have plenty of luxury these days. Take Qatar's Q Suites, for example, which is a business class and is still one of the best seats in the air today. Following suit, in the US, we've seen US airlines abolishing first class as well. Both United and Delta retired it along with their 747s about 10 years ago, now opting for Polaris Business on United and Delta One Business on Delta, both of which are game-changing seats in the US. There is still one airline in the US, however, that offers a true first class. American Airlines has one single plane with a true first class. On only their 777-300s, their largest aircraft, you'll find 8 first class seats in the front of the airplane. You better look quick, however, because at the end of this year, these seats too will be going away, and American will join United and Delta in offering an elevated business class product as their highest level of service to replace this first class. Welcome on board the Air Train here at New York's John F. Kennedy Airport, where we're heading off to Terminal 8 to hop on board the longest flight currently offering this cabin from New York out to Delhi, India. American Airlines uses Terminal 8, which is home to a good selection of oneworld carriers. Perhaps, however, one of the most frustrating things I've come across at JFK is just that there seems to be very minimal pattern of organization as far as where the airlines call home. Sure, a good handful of oneworld carriers are in Terminal 8 and Terminal 4 for SkyTeam, but not all of them. In fact, instead of bringing Alaska or another oneworld carrier to Terminal 8, they recently brought over non-alliance airline China Southern. In addition, there's no post-security connections. So for example, if you fly Alaska Airlines to JFK and connect on British Airways, which is a common ticket people book when they're traveling from the US West Coast to Europe, you'll have to leave security, take the air train to a different terminal, and go back through security. This is a somewhat irrelevant problem for me today since I was starting my journey here in Terminal 8, where the first door at the curb is the specific entrance for American Airlines and British Airways premium cabin travelers just past the sky cap. I'm actually quite excited to see this new check-in since I traveled American Airlines first class last year, but all of this was under construction, having been completed in December of 2022. Inside, you're greeted with a decorative wall for American Airlines and British Airways. The left side is strictly for business class passengers and oneworld Sapphire level of status. This is still in a private area, but is open to the rest of the terminal, unlike the ultra-private first class check-in. Over to the other side now, which is only usable for American and British Airways flagship first class passengers and oneworld Emerald level of status. The first class check-in is through a closed door and into a room that is fully enclosed. It almost reminds me of the premium check-in for Qatar Airways in Doha. For check-in, there's an overall concierge for both American Airlines and British Airways at the desks to the right. On the left side is seating areas where you can relax on the couches while waiting for check-in. Also similar to Doha's check-in, each check-in desk is like a consultation with individual desks and seating for each passenger, making the check-in process an actual enjoyable and comfortable experience. I'm glad to see more airports shifting to these special check-in areas. Check-in is a small part of the travel experience, but one way to differentiate yourself from the competition is to put extra effort into the smallest aspects of the travel journey. This is much better than just having a couple lines at the normal check-in counter for premium class passengers. From the check-in area, you're dumped straight out into the TSA pre-check line for security. For those without pre-check, you just have to go down a bit further, but at this point, if you travel internationally and are a US citizen, I'd personally advise that you get global entry for expedited immigration screening on arrival, and it includes TSA pre-check for 5 years. I do find it funny that as secure as US immigration is, there isn't any outbound immigration. But after normal security, we're into JFK's Terminal 8, which has been American Airlines' home since they set out to build JFK's largest terminal back in 1999. In fact, a number of the decorations in Terminal 8 are specifically American Airlines themed, even though the terminal is shared by about 12 airlines. There are a collection of American Airlines lounges accessible to oneworld travelers. The Admirals Club is the lowest level of their lounges, available to paid club members and oneworld business class or domestic first class passengers. Then there are the 3 newly renovated lounges, all named after areas of New York City. The 3 flagship lounges at JFK were renovated and came out in December of last year when British Airways moved from Terminal 7 to Terminal 8, and these lounges and check-in areas were all designed to be shared by American Airlines and British Airways. First off is the Greenwich Lounge. This lounge is accessible for oneworld Sapphire status members, but also British Airways passengers traveling in Club World or American Airlines passengers traveling specifically in flagship business, which only exists on flagship routes. Essentially, they're long-haul international flights or 3-class domestic flights like the JFK to San Francisco and Los Angeles domestic flights. This is the lounge that was formerly the Flagship First Lounge that I visited in my domestic Flagship First video that I published as the first video in my series titled The Ones, if you do want to see the inside of that lounge. The other 2 lounges are on the other side of the main walkway and are adjacent to each other up the same staircase. The Chelsea Lounge is for British Airways first class passengers and American Airlines flagship first passengers. The SoHo Lounge is the lounge for status members. American Airlines and British Airways' highest level of status will get you into this lounge in addition to oneworld Emerald status members, meaning they're following United's lead in that status alone won't get you into the highest level of lounge, as the Chelsea's lounge's access is similar to the United Polaris lounge access. Now, it should be noted that these check-in areas and lounges are unique to JFK Airport. American Airlines' other hubs don't have the same, instead currently still having their normal flagship check-in lanes and flagship lounges, although they did just sign a long-term agreement with their largest hub in Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas, so we may see upgraded flagship facilities there soon. Now, being flagship first on a qualifying route gets me access to the most secluded of American Airlines' lounges in their system, the Chelsea Lounge. Taking a walk around this lounge gave me a great idea for what they were truly going for. It is a very chic space with wonderful light fixtures, wall decor, and seating design. What I will say is that the first things that I noticed was that it's much smaller than other flagship lounges and doesn't seem to have any windows. It may have been those same factors, but it did seem to have the same feeling of a private society of the type you might find in New York. But maybe that was their goal after all. Inside the lounge, you'll find the main centerpiece bar. The bartender was amazingly friendly, and they had a fully stocked bar for whatever drinks you'd like crafted. In the center of the lounge is where you'll find the main seating area for the lounge. This is in addition to the seating you'll find all around the border of the lounge. The other large seating area is dedicated to the full-service restaurant. It's the only place to eat in the lounge, but you can sit down and have a waiter tend to your table as opposed to a buffet style. You can see the menu options here with a large number of items across different cultures and influences. The best part, it's all free, included in the lounge access, which is included with the ticket. I used miles for the ticket, but had I paid, it would definitely make sense to get some stuff included. While this lounge did feel super classy, I really wanted to know if there was anywhere to look out the windows, and I was informed that any passengers with access to the Chelsea Lounge also get access to the SoHo Lounge, so I decided to go and explore that one since it's directly connected. Essentially, the American Airlines lounges are in tiers, starting at the lowest being the Admirals Club, then the Greenwich Lounge, then SoHo Lounge, and lastly in highest tier is the Chelsea Lounge. You can enter any lounge that is lower than your tier, so as I have access to the Chelsea Lounge, I could get into any of these. The SoHo Lounge, however, might be my favorite as compared to the Chelsea Lounge. It's obviously more crowded and larger than the Chelsea Lounge, but it has a full wall of windows so you have a great view of the ramp, as well as having a large buffet, which I personally like better than the sit-down dining as I can take a little bit of a lot of different things. And I like to be a bit more independent rather than having someone serve me, which is ironic being on a first-class ticket where the whole point is to be extra personal with the crew. This lounge still has some great places, for example the workroom in the back, with sound-insulated walls making it a quiet place to work. Outside of that room, you'll see the sprawling lounge where it's all open seating. Since it's buffet-style dining in the SoHo Lounge, there's no dedicated dining areas, as people can take the food wherever they're sitting. Although there are definitely seats that are better designed for dining. Now, as far as the food offered in the lounge, it may not be the chef-curated food that they have in the Chelsea Lounge, but the selection and quality was great, starting off with meze options from the Middle East, including things like hummus, feta, lemon Greek yogurt, pita, olives, etc. Next up was more of a salad option, where they had an assortment of toppings and dressings and an assortment of veggies. Next was pre-mixed salads and an assortment of sandwiches, an apple brie pesto sandwich and a turkey club sandwich. Then was the hot items, which they were continuously rotating out, so there wasn't any food getting old and spoiled, so it was hard to get all the options in the same shot, but they had things like shrimp piccata, kale chickpea stew, mascarpone polenta, green beans with tomato and lemon, and some garlic citrus chicken. The end of the buffet table was, however, one of the greatest condiment shelves I've ever seen. Behind the buffet counter was another counter with mostly dessert and snack options as opposed to meal options. This starts off with chocolate sea salt pudding, chia coconut pudding, and an assortment of cookies. Next to that was fruit with apples, oranges, and bananas. Underneath the desserts was also where you can find a bunch of the plates. The next counter was the charcuterie board items with cheeses, meats, and spreads, along with some giardiniera with bread and crackers to use for the charcuterie items. The next counter was the jars of dried fruits and nuts and also some Skittles, basically a bunch of stuff you could use to mix and make trail mix in a bowl, and then Skittles. And then the last thing you'll find on the counter is the bags of chips. The SoHo Lounge also had a bar of its own. It may not be quite as chic as the Chelsea Lounge, but still had a bartender and an endless choice of options. For non-alcoholic options, they've got all kinds of good things. First, a full double-door fridge with sodas, waters, and beers. Next to that was the counter with coffee machine, iced coffee on tap, which was currently being refilled, an ice and water machine, and all the cups to go with it. Just past that is 2 phone booth rooms with sound-insulated walls. I decided to come in and I actually used it to record the voice for one of my videos. It's a small space, but was just big enough for me for about an hour. After I wrapped up the audio portion of my video editing, I left the phone booth for someone else and grabbed a seat over by the window. Around the corner from the main floor, there's 4 little booths that were available the whole time I was there. Personally, one of my favorite things is that almost every seat in the lounge has 1 or 2 charging ports, so you can have all your devices fully charged when you get on board. I finished my work while watching all different kinds of aircraft go by. After that, I decided to go visit one of their shower suites as it had been about 11 hours since I departed San Francisco earlier that morning. The shower suites are a great size, each suite coming stocked with a full-size towel, a hand towel, and a bath mat towel. Inside the large shower suite is also a toilet, a bench, a large counter with hair dryer, soap, lotion, and a sink, in addition to the full wall mirror. Lastly, the shower itself is a nice size, with a movable nozzle and a rain shower nozzle. In the shower, you'll also find a bench, and it's also stocked with soap, shampoo, and conditioner. After my shower, it was time to head out to the gate as I wanted to make sure I could get on the airplane early and film all the content regarding this first class seat. Past the phone booth, you can see the gate set up at JFK's Terminal 8. There's 2 corridors of gates, this one and then the walking tunnel that goes underneath the ramp area to another corridor where the Admirals Club is. Instead though, we're going to head down this main corridor down to gate 4. The first corridor of gates is largely used for flagship and international routes as it's directly connected to immigration and has most of the gates large enough for wide bodies, although you'll still find some big international flights in the far wing. This terminal here includes a good amount of variety of shops and restaurants, although I personally think there's more in the further wing, so if you don't have lounge access, you may want to walk out there to see those choices. Plus, you can get some extra steps in before getting on board. At Gate 4, they were completing visa checks for all connecting passengers. A lot of connecting passengers were able to board their first flight without needing to show any of the documents needed, but those still need to be checked prior to boarding, so those people will get called up to the gate to make sure all documents are in order. In the meantime, I was able to get a good look at our 777-300, which is a 7-year-old airplane originally delivered to American Airlines, and was actually the second to last 777 that they ever took delivery of. I also noticed that there was loads of security prepping going on at Gate 3. Turns out this was for the departure for Tel Aviv. As I've traveled the world, I've realized that there is no higher level of security than international flights to the US and Tel Aviv. Now, American Airlines, like other airlines, boards in groups, although the groups are organized a bit different due to less pre-board groups. United pre-boards like 6 different groups of people before getting to Group 1. American Airlines only pre-boards people needing extra time and their concierge key status members, which is their highest level of status. Then everyone else is dispersed between groups 1 through 9, which means the priority groups are 1 through 4, so there is even more gate lights than usual. The benefit with United in some Delta locations is that passengers in Group 1 and 2 individually have lines to line up before boarding even begins. So if business class passengers want to get on early, they can queue early. American only has a single line for Groups 1 through 4, and they also pre-boarded in that lane, making it difficult for people to line up early. I was actually able to find a seat near the boarding gate since I wouldn't dare contribute to the gate lice pandemic, but that did mean that when they called for Group 1, I was one of the first ones to get in line. I do like the glass wall jet bridges that afford a better view of the aircraft, but unfortunately we don't get that as often here in the US. Maybe just because of the cost of the air conditioning to keep it cool, but who knows. Now for the cabin of this beautiful 777-300, my favorite looking airplane. It has 4 cabins on American Airlines, first class in a 121 configuration, business class in a 121 configuration, premium economy in a 242 configuration, and lastly economy in a 343 configuration. Now first things first, as far as the seat for first class versus business class, since they're both in a 121 configuration, it's more about how they use that space, and it's also going to put a lot more emphasis on how the crew is. It was great to be the first one to the cabin so I could get a great view of this 121 first class setup on American. Here you can see what those business class seats look like, and they're definitely a bit more cramped on the first class seats. To be quite honest, and maybe I'm just bad with geometry, but I don't get how they got rid of all this space even with the same seating configuration. American Airlines business class will be saved for a later video, as I already have a trip booked from Dallas down to Sao Paulo, Brazil at the very end of this year, so stay tuned for that. Back at our seat, however, I'd love to look through the amenities that came with the seat. There were amenities not only on the seat itself, but also on the footrest, so there's plenty of stuff to look through between all of the bedding, all the in-flight material, and the goodies that were waiting on our seat side counter. Being that it's a first class seat, the flight attendants came up as soon as we sat down to ask what our choice of pre-departure beverage was. Since it's first class, rather than having options, we were able to pick whatever we wanted. However, I decided to start with a glass of champagne. First things first was the mattress pad for sleeping. When in bed mode, this was a very comfortable addition to the seat. All bedding was also supplied by Casper, the American bedding company, as you'll see with all bedding materials, blankets, and pillows. When it comes to pillows, we actually had 2. The first one is the main one used in sleep, and it's a good size, but definitely on the softer side. So if you like firmer pillows like me, it might be best to bring something else to use, or you can use the other pillow, which is a bit smaller, but definitely firmer. It's largely what I use for lumbar support while sitting in my seat. They also gave us 2 blankets. Neither were particularly bulky, but both served their purpose. The first one was soft and stretchy. It was a comfortable material, and I used it mostly when I was sitting in my seat, whereas the other blanket was given more of a comforter. It was a bit thin, but was great at insulating heat, so I only used this when it was time for bed, and in order to get extra comfortable, I actually layered both blankets. The first was comfortable, and the comforter was great for keeping me warm. We were also offered pajamas from the crew. They had a small medium and a large extra large. I did get to use these after dinner once we got ready for bed. At the seat on the counter were some noise cancelling headphones that were super comfortable and some of the best noise cancelling that I've ever had, but they were a bit heavy, at least by headphone standards. They also provided us with the form for Indian immigration, which was great on arrival since it was already filled out, so we could walk straight to the immigration counter and hand them our visa. Then a look at the amenity kit, which first off is probably the nicest looking bag I've ever received. Emirates First Class Bulgari bag is probably the only one that rivals it. Inside the amenity kit was unfortunately a bit of a letdown, as it was just the basic items with eye mask and socks, dental kit and pen, and then the amenities themselves, including a cleansing towel, face cream, lotion, and lip balm from American Airlines sponsor DS and Durga. Lastly, looking at the menu for our flight, which was specifically the menu for the 8 first-class passengers, or I guess I should say 7, because one person ended up not showing up, at least based on the seat map that morning. First was the insert with the drink options. One side was wines and champagnes, mostly sourced from California, and the other side then included the beers, hard alcohols, and soft drinks. Then for the food itself, the first panel when you open the menu was a welcome letter in both English and Hindi. Then came all the food. We will have 2 scheduled meals, and then there will be a mid-flight snack as well. As vegetarians are fairly common in India, there was not only some tasty looking food options, but the vegetarian options were not too skimpy. Unfortunately, most airlines will do the bare minimum when it comes to providing special meals. For the seat itself, American Airlines actually uses different fabrics for their first, business, and economy class cabins. This is the pattern for the first class seats. First off, over my left shoulder was an accent light. Not the most extravagant looking light, but it is how I learned that this qualifies as a Class 3 rest facility for crew in flight. Essentially a space for crew to rest that reclines at least 40 degrees and provides leg and foot support that isn't adjacent to passengers. Since today's flight's over a 15-hour flight duty period, crew must be provided a full bunk, not just a seat, meaning the airline was able to sell all the seats since the 777 is also equipped with crew bunks. Next to that was this door, which I figured would go to a cubby, but was actually just the door to all of the plugs, including 2 universal charging ports. It also included a mirror on the door, and I've started enjoying seeing where different airlines like to put their mirrors. Below that is the seatback TV remote. It's the remote that's becoming more common and includes a screen and can serve almost as a second TV. Next up was the entire counter that was between the seat and the window. The large counter was home to a number of features. The first feature was an unfolding table. The location may seem weird, but makes all more sense once we get up in the air. Next to that was a removable tablet to control all the seat controls. It had presets as well as individual adjustments, and it was removable. However, we weren't able to remove that until we actually got up in the air. Next to that was a tray with a USB charging port. Unfortunately, the charging port wasn't great as my phone continued losing battery power slowly when plugged into it, even though it said it was charging. Below that are 3 buttons, one to turn on the counter light, one to release the TV, and one to open up the flap that held the main tray table. Speaking of which, that tray table pulled out of the side counter and was absolutely ginormous. Even in its half-folded setup, it was larger than most tray tables. If I wanted to unfold it all the way, I had plenty of space to both eat and work. In front of each seat was similar to any other business or first class seat, including a TV and a footrest that became part of the bed when reclined. The TV was tucked into the seat back in front of each seat and had to be secured for takeoff and landing, so there was a button on the counter in order to release that TV to make it squared off with the seat. The literature pocket was also near the footrest. In the pocket was the safety card, air sickness bag, and a brochure for one of American Airlines' credit cards. The footrest was fairly large and not only provided a larger space for your feet, but also an extra seat. If you were traveling with someone else, they could use the footrest as a seat, hence the seat belt. The only note is that only other first-class passengers are allowed to join you, and not for takeoff and landing. Underneath the footrest was some storage. I kept my backpack here, and since it was still pretty far away, there was still plenty of space for my feet. To the right of that may be one of my favorite spaces I've seen on an airplane. For those people looking for a place for their shoes, this little cubby was a little carpeted area perfect for shoes, in addition to where I kept my amenity kit. I also found these little handles on the outside of each armrest. On the ground and in flight I tried moving the handles, but couldn't ever get anything to happen. There's also a little coat hook here on the seat back in front of you. The front of the armrest, however, is the button that activated the most unique part of this seat. The seat has 3 positions, facing forward for takeoff and departure, facing the TV, or facing the counter directly away from the aisle. There's also 2 seat control buttons that are separate from the seat control tablet over your right shoulder. Perhaps one of my favorite features, however, is the individual overhead air vents, which I've learned not to take for granted considering most airplanes don't include it. American Airlines does have it not only on their seats on the windows, but also in the middle seats as well. As we push back, I looked through the terminal window to realize that no one can resist the beauty of the 777-300, as there was plenty of people taking pictures or watching as we pushed back from the gate. With everything needing to be stowed for takeoff and landing, I also found a good home for all the bedding here underneath the counter just immediately adjacent to my seat. Now, as we taxi out, a bit about this airport, which is amongst the busiest international airports in the world. JFK ranks 16th on the list of most internationally connected airports. We've already discussed the absolute mess of the terminal organization in the sense of the seemingly random spread of airlines, but also the airports were largely designed when airplanes were much smaller, and so there's a bunch of places on the airport surface where you can't have two airplanes moving at the same time, meaning planes must all wait while planes enter and exit the gate areas one at a time. This is being improved by construction to improve the spaces, but construction brings issues of its own, and it doesn't end there, unfortunately. And it's also not only JFK, all three of New York's airports have similar issues. They're all facing overcrowding issues, and close proximity can cause a bottleneck of arrivals and delays for departures, especially for transoceanic flights. This creates a large number of delays from these airports, especially when external factors are also at play, like the weather system, since the US Northeast can have crazy weather patterns that can cause ground stops, or at least limit the arrival and departure options that are able to be used. Since New York is such an aviation cornerstone, any delays or cancellations here will compound and affect the entire world of aviation. Things definitely seem to be getting better. LaGuardia, for example, is now an excellent terminal, for example, so hopefully things are on the come up here at New York's aviation. In-flight and time for the in-flight entertainment. American Airlines has almost an entirely different selection of in-flight entertainment options, which is definitely refreshing to see. On the homepage, you can see the different categories. Entertainment, for example, has the choices for movies, TV show, and audio. Movies have all their genres and can also be sorted by available language. In addition, I always enjoy when you can add options to your favorites so it's easier to find the things you like, as opposed to searching for them every time. Right off the bat, I was already getting a bit frustrated as the screen's responsiveness to touch was not great. It would commonly have delays, just jump around a little bit. The best way to deal with this is with the seatback remote. From here you have all the same choices as the seatback TV itself. We can see all the entertainment options in movies. The main difference that I noticed is that you can't add things to your favorites like you can on a seatback TV. There were also a good amount of TV show options, although I think I was most impressed by the sheer amount of international TV show options. Only United seems to have more international entertainment options. The best thing about American Airlines entertainment was that they have partnered with Apple TV and HBO Max to give you access to a number of shows for free while you're on board. This means I can watch one of my all-time favorite shows now, Ted Lasso, where just like other TV shows, there's a few episodes in sequence from a random season. In this case, it's the first 4 episodes of Season 2. Music options were also sorted by genre, including having a lot of international options, just like TV shows. American also offers a large collection of audiobooks that you can browse if you were more into that than watching a show or listening to music. For the music, some genres had a ton of album options like pop, but some, like R&B, only actually had one album. Under hospitality, the only thing that they have at the moment is the list of beverages. This included hot and cold options, alcoholic and non-alcoholic options. We also quite possibly see the greatest joy about flying American Airlines. It is the only airline that currently serves Dr. Pepper, but I guess that's what you get with a Texas-based airline. Then the communication tab offered only a seat-to-seat chat. Traveling alone, I didn't use it today, but you can attach your name virtually to your seat number and chat with other people on board. There's also a Connect tab. I figured it would describe Wi-Fi connectivity, but instead it included news articles from all around the world, which is kind of cool and gives you something to read. Lastly was the My Flight tab, including things like airport maps of some of their larger destinations. Some continents had more available maps than others. Using these were helpful, however, especially for connecting passengers to help find food during their layover, for example. They also had videos that went into details not only about a good amount of American Airlines destinations, but they also had tours of the seats on board the aircraft, which is where I was really able to get a tour of everything that was available on my first class seat. I also realized at this time that you were able to get between the categories of each chapter at the top of the menus as well. The last piece of the TV was the map. It was my favorite kind of map that's offered nowadays on these airplanes, being able to be moved around, adjusted, zoomed in and out, as well as also having a number of different views, and even has a way to search for basically any large city in the world and learn about the things in that city. For people traveling with kids, there was also a kids section to access with its own movies, TV shows, and maps specifically geared towards kids. After some time scrolling through options, I was able to favorite some items, however, making it just a little bit easier to find those things later on when I did want to watch them. Then I wanted to connect to the Wi-Fi. Most airlines offer free Wi-Fi for first-class passengers, take Emirates, British Airways, and Qatar Airways for example. Even airlines like Singapore and Aer Lingus offer Wi-Fi to business-class passengers. No such luck on American Airlines, however. Fortunately, you can purchase full-flight Wi-Fi. A lot of airlines only allow you to buy Wi-Fi for a certain amount of megabits, but I could pay $35 for full-flight Wi-Fi. Just not exactly the service I'm looking for in first class. As I settled in to get comfortable and watch some of my favorite Ted Lasso, I realized that my in-flight entertainment system wasn't working. Each movie and TV show that I tried to watch, it would play all the advertisements just fine, and then it would crash. They actually tried to reset this. Apparently the issue was happening in business class as well, but to no avail. As it turned out, for the remainder of our flight, we would have no seatback entertainment. Then they came through to close the curtains between each cabin because nothing's better than the private feel of a first-class cabin. However, the curtain was so sheer that it was almost non-existent, and I could see the people in the first row of business class. It wasn't long, however, before they came by with tablecloths to start our first of our meal services. Starting off, they handed every passenger just a plain bottle of water to start the meal. Nuts are usually a given to start a meal, however I did very much appreciate the olives that went along with it. It was also time for the first of our beverage choices, of which I decided to start with a nice Jack and Coke. While waiting for my meal, I was watching the map since that was working, however, eventually my screen just stopped working altogether. They were able to reboot the system and I was able to have my map again, however, unfortunately, the entertainment content was never available. First up was the appetizer. I decided to go with the vegetarian option, which was white balsamic poached figs with dates, mint oil, and a honey ricotta. It was absolutely to die for. I also decided I couldn't face front anymore. I had to angle myself towards my tray table, so I used this button here you can see rotating my seat to face the tray table. However, I could even go one more click, go all the way over to face entirely to the counter, which we did get to later in flight. Right before the main course came out, they came by with bread offerings, of which I chose a sourdough roll and some garlic naan. For the main course, I went with the lamb cutlets with a mustard pistachio crust, forbidden rice, and fresh greens. The lamb was actually cooked pretty well, although the crust of it was a bit soggy. The taste, however, was fantastic. They also came around with a pretzel roll, so I ended up actually having one of each type of bread that they offered. And then to wrap it up was a dessert, which was a wonderful butter cake a la mode with a berry topping on top. It was now time to check out the lavatory and change into pajamas. When I think of first class bathrooms, I think of grand spaces, at least double the size of normal lavatories with tons of amenities. I have to say I was a bit underwhelmed. It is a fairly normal bathroom. It's a bit larger than the normal lavatories, and it did have a nice sink, but shockingly, other than the soap and a deodorizer, there wasn't really any other additional amenities, not even mouthwash, lotion, or anything else like that. Although I guess we did have a lot of stuff like that in our amenity kit, but it's just the type of stuff you typically find in a first-class bathroom. I did, however, have a huge mirror to visualize changing into my pajamas. First, I wanted to take a look at all of the seat modes that this seat could turn to. First off, you can see the three positions the chair can swivel to, facing forward, facing the table, or facing all the way over to the counter. Now that we were in flight, I was able to take more of a look here at the little remote that was used to control the seat. On there, you can see that we have options for the seat controls individually, the seat presets, and a privacy filter. With the privacy filter here, you can see just above your seat number on the outside of your seat shell, you can see the privacy please turned on. Taking a look at the seat presets, it started in the takeoff and landing position. From there, we reclined it to the movie preset, which puts you at a good angle to watch anything you have on your seatback TV. Then is the relax preset, which just dumps you back a little bit more into the seat, feeling like you're sitting in a bucket, similar to the zero gravity setting that you hear about on a lot of these airplanes. Lastly was the bed mode. The seat lies fully flat, using the footrest as an extension of the bed. Because of how large and wide the seat is, it actually makes for a very good sized bed. Once I reclined, I realized that underneath the counter was actually where they held the slippers for this seat. So I was finally able to get those out and put those on when I needed to get out of my seat and around the cabin. Then it was time to finally set up the bed. They did offer a turn-down service, however I felt like I could probably manage putting my bed together myself. Now the mattress pad here by Casper was probably the second best mattress pad I've had on an airplane after only the Emirates first class mattress pad. Then to add both blankets, first the thin and comfortable blanket, and on top of that the warm and insulating blanket. That combined with both blankets and both pillows actually made a very comfortable bed. I guess that is one of the perks of a first class seat. Because of the size of the bed and the space for each seat, it can make a much more comfortable bed, and since there's no need to put your feet in a little cubby underneath the counter in front of you, there's a ton of space for your feet no matter how you sleep. I also felt like I was cheating a little bit since I used my United amenity kit box to hold all my chargers and stuff on an American Airlines flight. I got settled in and plugged in all my devices, however I then noticed that the door to the chargers wouldn't shut if there were things plugged into it. Really not that big of a deal, as my devices were still able to get charged up, while in the meantime I got comfortable and settled in for a wonderful first class sleep. I slept for about 6 hours and I could have slept for much more, however I did set an alarm so that I didn't sleep for too long, as I wanted to arrive tired in India to help beat the jet lag since we were arriving at about 8 p.m. Looking at my map, however, I realized we had about 7 hours left and we were still flying over the more westerly part of Europe. It was also completely bright outside as we crossed Europe, as this was another one of those weird flights where we took off just after sunset, flew through an entire sunrise, full day period, and then landed just after the sunset the next day. I wasted no time getting myself a coffee to make sure that I was awake, and also, unfortunately, the entertainment was still not working. Instead, I luckily had about 10 episodes of Parks and Rec and a couple movies downloaded on my laptop, so that operated as a great plan B. The flight attendants waiting for people to wake up from their sleep, and as they noticed people wake up one by one, they went up and asked if they wanted one of the mid-flight meals. I decided to go with the turkey Kafka sliders, which came with the chipotle aioli, pickles, lettuce, tomatoes, and a slaw on the side. This was now the second meal that was absolutely fantastic, and it was even better to enjoy as the clouds had finally cleared and we could see the fields of Romania as we flew over Eastern Europe. Now that I had eaten my mid-flight snack, I decided that I would get a little bit of work done and watch a little bit more TV as we cruised on our way to India. This was where I took full advantage of the seat rotation as I made it face that counter, folded out my tray table, and had an excellent space to work. This was probably the most private the seat felt as I was facing directly away from the aisle. I also now call back to the beginning of the video when we were touring the seat and we saw this little fold-out counter. At the time, with the seat facing forward, it felt to be in kind of a weird spot. Now, however, that we're in flight and we've rotated the seat to face the window, you can see that it makes a lot more sense. I can sit there and work on my laptop, and best of all, while working on my laptop, I have a wonderful view out the window as we flew by some beautiful scenery, especially as we'll see later. Perhaps my only complaint, however, with the way this is set up is that there's not a ton of legroom underneath that countertop. Much more legroom if you're facing the TV, so just keep that in mind, I guess, if you're looking to stay comfortable in this seat. Part of staying comfortable is not being hungry. If you go to the galley, you'll find plenty of snacks, sweet and savory, full things from sandwiches to just little fruits and drinks. At any point, you are more than welcome to go to the galley and grab some of that. In addition, the flight attendants could make you or bring you any drink that you needed as well. It seemed that the closer we got to India, the more amazing the scenery got. You can see here these wonderful snow-capped mountains, which is impressive in the summer to still have that much snow on them. The scenery here as we crossed over Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan was absolutely gorgeous. Now, I mentioned earlier that the noise-canceling headphones that came with the seat were some of the best noise-canceling headphones I've had so far, but since my seatback TV wasn't working, I had to get a little bit creative since I had to listen to my own entertainment on my computer. But I still wanted that noise-canceling, so what I did is I took those wires from my Apple headphones, put them underneath my noise-canceling headphones, and I was able to still have that wonderful noise-canceling quality of audio that I would want from a seatback TV anyway. This was kind of a fun route since I've never really seen this part of the world flying over at daytime, so I was able to see a bunch of new things like Baku, the capital city of Azerbaijan. This was made even better by the fact that it was all just a backdrop to working in the airplane on my computer, one of the best backdrops I've ever worked on with my computer. And the closer we got to India as we went through more and more countries and past more and more capital cities, it seemed as if the terrain was just getting extra beautiful. It seemed like it was also getting taller and taller, especially as we flew over the stands, including northern Pakistan specifically. We seemed to be flying by these wonderful snow-capped mountains. And so in all, I'm going to sit back for a little bit and let the scenery do the talking for the next minute or so. I was excited for this last meal of the flight here, however I was sad that it was going to distract from the beautiful scenery that we had outside the airplane. I decided to go with the vegetarian option for this meal since I went with the meat option for my first meal. And as mentioned earlier in the video, because there's so many vegetarians in India, they do actually have to put a little bit of effort into the vegetarian meals that were offered, and this meal, just like the rest, were fantastic. Now, it wouldn't be a flight on American Airlines if I didn't get my Dr. Pepper, so of course the flight started with one of those. For the main course, however, it was a paneer dish, scrambled cottage cheese with spiced potatoes, chickpea lentils, served with flatbread, plain yogurt, and a gulab jamun with honey dessert with pistachios and almonds. And you can see here, even with all of my stuff completely spread out around my seat, I still have plenty of space. More than enough space to eat, more than enough space to work, all while watching whatever's on your seatback TV or whatever beautiful terrain is right outside one of your 3 windows. As we crossed over Pakistan, however, the sun was slowly beginning to set, as was our airplane, as we made our beginning to our descent into the Delhi area. Now, if you were to book this flight from JFK to Delhi with cash, you'd probably be paying somewhere around the realm of $8,000 to $10,000 for a first-class seat. Personally, I could never justify that for this seat, considering that's similar to the prices of things like Emirates first class, which I think is just miles ahead of this seat. That being said, I was able to get this on an amazing redemption rate. I could only find a couple dates at this rate, but from San Francisco to New York to Delhi, all in the first class cabin, I was able to book this for 85,000 Advantage miles, which for a total of 20 hours in business class was well worth every mile spent. It was also about this time that they came through to tell us that we should start wrapping up our things, since we were going to have to close that countertop tray table, put away any large devices, and more importantly, the seat would have to face back towards the front for takeoff and landing. So as we made our final descent into Delhi and everything was wrapped up, the cabin was secured, so I sat back and enjoyed the descent for the last moments in my first class seat. As far as reflecting on this flight, I personally was very excited for this flight, as it was my first long-haul flight with American Airlines, and it was also specifically first class, which is always an added treat on top of normal business class. That being said, I would say the product is actually more comparable to most business classes. First things first, what JFK did with the flagship check-in is incredible. The business class check-in is great, but the first class check-in is amazing in the sense they were able to make a cozy space in an airport. Tell me the next time you hear cozy and airport used in the same sentence. The new lounges at JFK are also game-changing compared to the old lounges. I do feel that the Chelsea lounge for first-class ticketed passengers was the nicer lounge, but it is definitely small and not having windows was a bit strange, so having access to the SoHo Lounge as well was an excellent touch by American, so that if you want the views or buffet dining, you do have that available. If you do want to see what the Greenwich Lounge or business class lounge looks like, go ahead and take a look at my flagship first transcontinental video, as I did cover that in that video. Now for the onboard product. With a 1-2-1 configuration, the same as business class, I was interested to see how they made it better. The answer? The seat's slightly wider and there's only 8 people in the cabin, meaning the flight attendants are a bit more personal, but that's about it. As mentioned, I think it compares more to business classes offered around the world just based on the seat alone. I did enjoy the swivel of the seat, and it made for an excellent workplace, although typically I like to watch TV while working on airplanes, and even if the TV was working, it would have just been at a little bit of a strange angle. However, being able to watch the mountains of Azerbaijan, Tajikistan, and Pakistan go by was even better than any TV show I could have ever watched. It was also a little bit of a bummer to pay $35 for Wi-Fi, considering that you would think that one of the amenities you'd get in the first class cabin would be free Wi-Fi included. Not the end of the world, as $35 for a full flight Wi-Fi still seemed like a good deal for me, and I got plenty of work done because of it. The crew also did have a much more personal touch, making sure I felt like a person that they knew and not just another butt in a seat. In addition, I did actually really enjoy the food options. I tried both the Indian options, one veg and one non-veg, and found the lamb to be cooked beautifully and the paneer to be super tasty and spiced almost as good as an Indian airline could do themselves. The meal service also had 2 big benefits. First off, rather than bringing the cart through the cabin to serve trays, they individually served each passenger, and also, rather than one tray with everything on it, they served each plate one at a time. Neither of those compare, however, to the joy of having a Dr. Pepper on board. When it comes down to it, if we compare this seat to other business class seats, I actually think it was very nice. However, I just don't think it matches up to the current first class offerings in the world. That being said, it won't be around for long. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that this is the last first class in the United States, so if you want to experience it, get on it quick, as next year they'll most likely begin phasing it out altogether, following the suits of United and Delta of an all-business class design to replace their flagship routes in the 777, and possibly also the 787, but perhaps most impressive on the A321LR variants that they use for transcontinental and possibly transatlantic routes. All of those I'm excited to try out when they arrive next year, hopefully. All in all, I'm excited for the upcoming change, as this was more of a try it before it's gone kind of thing. And as the world's largest airline, American Airlines still has a lot to prove. But I'm definitely curious on all of your thoughts on American Airlines' first class product before it goes away. In the meantime, however, I'm heading off to the Holiday Inn that is located directly in the Delhi airport. This is the last thing I want to cover on this video, as it is one of those little travel hacks if you are connecting in Delhi. Essentially, they have a connection point inside and outside of immigration, so if you have a connecting flight and you don't have to recheck your bags, you just have to go through the transfer customs and then off to the hotel. I, however, did have to collect my check bag and go out through immigration. From there, I went to a Holiday Inn stand where I met one of the employees who escorted me up to the hotel. The hotel may not be the nicest thing in the world, but boy is it convenient. Located immediately above the check-in desk, so for my connecting flight the next morning, I was here and I was ready to start my day. But that's all for today, folks. So as always, let me know your thoughts on American Airlines First Class, safe travels, and I'll see y'all next time.